Imagine this. It's a beautiful summer morning, the kind of day that makes you feel like everything is perfect. The sun is shining, the streets are buzzing with the excitement of a 4th of July parade, and families are eagerly waiting for the festivities to begin. Kids are running around with sparklers in their hands, their laughter filling the air. It's a day of celebration, of freedom, of joy. But here's the thing. What if the biggest threat wasn't some distant enemy or a natural disaster? What if the biggest threat was standing right there among them, watching with cold, calculated eyes, waiting for the perfect moment to strike? This is the story of a man, Robert E. Crimo III, who, on that day, decided to turn that beautiful moment of celebration into a nightmare that would haunt the community of Highland Park forever. Let me ask you, how many of us really think something like that could happen to us? We're at a parade with our families celebrating life. Could something like that happen to us? Well, for those who were at the Highland Park parade that day, they never saw it coming. Crimo, at just 21 years old, had been planning this for months. Can you even imagine what it must have been like for him? The anger, the coldness, the complete detachment. He had a plan. He wanted to make sure people would know his name. But what made him do it? What was it that pushed a young man, just 21, over the edge? Now picture this. You're standing there with your family watching the parade. It's hot, but it's exciting, right? You feel that sense of joy, the excitement of being part of something bigger than yourself. The next thing you know, the first shot rings out. Imagine hearing that sound, so sudden, so out of place. It's like a nightmare unfolding before your eyes. Your heart races, your legs freeze. You're not sure what's happening, but you know it's bad. What would you do in that moment? Would you run? Would you shield your loved ones? Irina McCarthy, a mother just like any of us, did exactly that. She grabbed her 2-year-old son, pulling him close as she tried to escape the madness. Her husband, Kevin, did the same, but the terror that followed, it was unimaginable. The chaos, the screams, the panic. Can you picture it? The noise, the confusion, the pain? Now let me take you deeper. As Crimo stood there, hidden and watching, he didn't care about any of that. He wasn't just shooting to escape. He was making a statement, executing a plan. His mind was set. Nothing else mattered. 7 lives would be stolen that day, and 48 others would carry the weight of the physical and emotional scars. What makes this even scarier is that Crimo wasn't just a figure in the distance. He was one of them. He walked among them. He had a plan, and he was hiding it in plain sight. Does that make you feel uneasy? And now Crimo was gone, vanishing into the chaos. But that wasn't the end. No, this story doesn't stop there. Because behind every shot fired, behind every life lost, there was something deeper, something darker. And the more we peel back, the more we'll see. This story is not just about a young man in a parade. It's about questions, about choices, about what happens when someone like Crimo decides to break. But what could have stopped him? What could have been done before that moment? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think something could have been prevented? Let's talk about it. And hey, don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to stay with me as we uncover more details about this chilling case. Trust me, we've only just scratched the surface. Can you imagine being 21 years old, standing on the edge of the world, with a mind as cold as ice? How does someone get to that point? What kind of thoughts would twist your mind until you could no longer see the value in human life? Crimo had been planning this for months, carefully orchestrating every detail. He was meticulous, calculated. No one knew the kind of darkness brewing inside him, and honestly, that's the scariest part. Because we're talking about a young man, someone who walked among us, living a life seemingly just like anyone else's. But here's the thing, we all have our limits, right? We all have that breaking point, the moment when we decide what path we're going to take. But Crimo's path, well, it wasn't a moment of desperation. It wasn't about a single event that pushed him over the edge. No, this was about a long, slow burn. His behavior had raised red flags long before that fateful day. Think about it, he had tried to harm himself in the past. He had threatened to kill his family. How did no one see this? How did people around him not recognize the signs? Let's pause for a second. I know a lot of you are probably asking, why didn't someone stop him? Why didn't his family do something? Well, that's where it gets unsettling. His father, in what can only be described as tragic irony, helped Crimo get his gun license. That's right. His father, who later expressed regret, signed off on a process that allowed his son to legally purchase firearms. Can you even wrap your head around that? I mean, what does it say about a family dynamic when something like that happens? What does it take for a father to not see the danger in his own child, when a red flag is waved so boldly that it can't be ignored? But we'll get to that later. Let's focus on the preparation, the eerie silence of it all. Because Crimo wasn't just sitting around waiting for a trigger moment. Oh no, he was methodical, building this plan with precision. Every moment counted. Every detail had been considered. It was like a bomb ticking, waiting for the right moment to go off. Do you see the difference now? This wasn't a spontaneous act of violence. This was something darker, something much more calculated. Crimo wasn't just a kid who snapped, he was a man who planned. And when you hear that first shot ring out, when you realize that you've just become part of someone else's twisted agenda, there's no going back. It's chilling, isn't it? As the first bullet tore through the air, you could almost feel it. The shock, the confusion, the disbelief. I mean, this wasn't supposed to happen. People were just out there trying to enjoy a day with their families, right? They were there to see parades, to celebrate freedom. But freedom? What freedom did those who died ever get to experience? Let's think about this for a moment. What would have gone through Crimo's mind as he watched the chaos unfold below him? The adrenaline rush of the power he held, the control over life and death in that instant. Was there any remorse? Did he feel anything at all? That's the part we'll never truly understand. Because after the shots were fired, after the lives were changed forever, Crimo was just gone. As the crowd scattered, as people dove for cover, it's hard to imagine how those seconds felt. The seconds before the moment of horror, when people still had hope, when they still thought this might be a prank or a misunderstanding. But then, as the bullets kept coming, the reality sank in. Imagine being in that crowd, looking up and seeing people fall, knowing that this was real, this was happening. What would you do in that moment? Would you freeze? Would you run? Would you protect the ones you love? Comment below, what would you have done if you were there? Let me know. I really want to hear your thoughts on this. And don't forget to like and subscribe, because the next part of this story is going to make your skin crawl. We're diving deep into the aftermath of the attack, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. The escape and the search. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of the people who were there that day. Picture it, absolute chaos. The sound of the shots ringing in your ears. The faces around you twisted in fear. And then, just like that, it all stops. The gunfire fades away, the air still thick with tension, but Crimo? He's gone. How does someone just disappear in the middle of something like this? How does a person walk away after doing something so horrific, leaving behind a scene of carnage and blend back into the world like nothing ever happened? That's exactly what Crimo did. And it's honestly terrifying to think about. The police were on the scene within minutes. But Crimo wasn't there. He had planned this escape too, a plan that made sure he wouldn't be caught easily. He was calm. He was collected. He knew exactly what to do. Can you imagine being a first responder arriving at that scene, trying to make sense of it all? The confusion, the panic, the overwhelming sense of helplessness. You're not just dealing with the victims, you're dealing with the chaos of a community that has just been torn apart. But Crimo had already slipped through the cracks. He wasn't on the ground with the rest of the terrified crowd. He wasn't hiding among the chaos. No, he was miles away by the time anyone even realized what had happened. And he didn't stop there. Crimo didn't just vanish into thin air. No, he had a plan, a path, a way to blend back in, to avoid the cameras and the witnesses who would soon start piecing the puzzle together. So what happened next? The search for him was relentless. They put up roadblocks. They asked for tips. They interviewed witnesses. But Crimo was still out there, hiding in plain sight. It was almost like he had planned the escape just as carefully as the attack. And that's what's chilling about this. He wasn't running out of fear. He wasn't hiding because he had to. He was doing it because it was part of his plan. This wasn't just a crime of passion. This was calculated. This was cold. But every minute that passed brought the authorities closer to catching him. They knew it was just a matter of time before they found him. After all, they had the rifle. They had the suspect. The whole town was on edge and the pressure was mounting. What do you think he was feeling as the search went on? Was he calm, or did the weight of what he had done start to sink in? And then, just hours after the shooting, Crimo was found, apprehended by a sharp-eyed officer in Lake Forest. But by then it was too late. The damage had been done. 7 lives were gone. Dozens more were wounded. And the community? They were forever changed. Imagine being in that town after the fact. You've lost loved ones, witnessed unimaginable violence, and you still don't have answers. You don't understand why. What would that do to a place like Highland Park? What would that do to the people who once felt safe? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think it's like to be a part of a community after something like this happens? Let's talk about it. We're diving deeper into the aftermath of this case in the next part. It's going to get even more intense, and you'll want to be here for it. The investigation unfolds. Now let's think about the aftermath. Crimo is in custody. The The shooting is over, but the damage it left behind? That was just beginning. In the days after the tragedy, the streets of Highland Park were filled with grief. People didn't know how to process what had happened. They weren't just mourning the lives lost. They were mourning the loss of a sense of safety, a sense of normalcy. The fear that had gripped the town still lingered. The feeling that the unthinkable could happen anywhere. Can you imagine what it must have been like for the families who had lost loved ones that day? The McCarthys, Irina and Kevin, had shielded their son in those final moments. They protected him with their bodies. And then just like that they were gone. Gone without a trace, and their son would have to grow up without them. But it wasn't just the immediate victims that were affected. Everyone in that community felt the weight of it. The survivors, the witnesses, the first responders who had to face the horror of what they saw. The people who were just there, trying to enjoy a parade, who suddenly found themselves caught in the middle of a nightmare. And what about the rest of Crimo's family? When you dig deeper into the case, things get even more unsettling. His own father had helped him get the firearms that would later be used to carry out the massacre. A father who had heard the warning signs, who had seen his son's erratic behavior. A father who had turned a blind eye, thinking he could control the situation. Do you think it was just neglect? Or was it something darker, something more twisted? Crimo's family was quickly thrust into the spotlight, but it was clear. Nothing could ever explain away the horror their son had caused. The scrutiny, the judgment, the questions, it all became too much. And yet, as the investigation unraveled, it became clear that Crimo wasn't just a boy lost in the system. No, he was a product of something far more complex, something deeper. The investigators scoured every piece of his digital life. His social media posts, his music videos, his online activity. And what they found was chilling. Crimo had been posting disturbing images and videos for months, if not longer. A manifesto, if you will. He had been planning this day long before it happened. He had been preparing mentally for it, psyching himself up for the carnage he would unleash. Can you imagine how the investigators must have felt as they went through his online presence? Reading his thoughts, seeing the signs, realizing that everything they needed to know about his state of mind was right there in plain sight? And here's the kicker. Crimo wasn't even hiding it. He didn't think he was doing anything wrong. In his mind, he was justified. He was the hero of his own twisted story. The most terrifying part? He wanted people to know what he was about to do. He wanted to make a statement. At that moment, the investigation wasn't just about finding the shooter. It was about understanding how someone could become this monster. How did a young man, seemingly with no history of serious violence, decide to take so many lives in cold blood? This is where we start to see just how deeply the scars of this tragedy run. It's not just the bodies that were lost, it's the innocence. It's the trust in the world around us. When something like this happens, it changes you. It changes the people involved, the witnesses, the investigators. It changes the entire community. And this is just the beginning of the answers we're going to find. But let me ask you, when you hear about people like Crimo, who do you blame? The family? The community? Or is this something that we just can't prevent no matter how hard we try? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk about it. And if you're still with me, make sure to like and subscribe because this case is far from over. The next part is going to dive deeper into the sentencing and the aftermath that shook the world. The trial and the guilty plea. After everything, after the lives lost, the investigation, the media storm, Crimo was finally ready to face the consequences of his actions. But this wasn't going to be a typical trial. It wasn't going to be some Hollywood courtroom drama with a last-minute twist or a surprise defense. No, this was a chilling reminder that some people, no matter the age, can commit horrific acts, and no amount of words will ever bring back the victims. So let's pause for a second. How do you even begin to process something like this? A 21-year-old, barely an adult, with the entire world in front of him, decides to end 7 lives and destroy so many others in a single senseless act. Crimo's trial wasn't just about justice for the victims, it was about understanding the depths of his mind. It was about trying to figure out why. But here's the thing, there was no real explanation. There was no sudden outburst, no tragic breakdown that led him to snap. No, Crimo's actions were premeditated, cold, calculated. And that's what makes this so disturbing. This wasn't just an impulsive act. This wasn't some explosion of rage. Crimo planned this out. He studied it, thought about it, dreamed it. And yet, despite all the signs, despite all the warnings, no one ever stopped him. But let's talk about the trial. For weeks, the courtroom was filled with tension. The families of the victims, the survivors, the first responders, they were all there, sitting in that room trying to make sense of it all. And then March 2025 came. Crimo, the once proud young man who'd posted his intentions for the world to see, entered a plea deal. He pleaded guilty to everything. All 69 counts, 21 counts of first-degree murder, 48 counts of attempted murder, and countless others. All of them confessed by the very person who caused the destruction. Do you think it was a relief? Or do you think it was just a way to avoid the agony of a lengthy trial? To avoid facing the full weight of his actions in front of a jury? The courtroom was quiet. No shouting. No drama. Just the cold sound of reality settling in. There was no defense. There were no excuses. The chilling truth was that Crimo had planned this. He wanted to make a statement, and he did. But in the end, no one was listening. No one could understand him. And then came the sentencing. The families of the victims stood up. The emotional testimonies came pouring out, each one filled with pain, loss, and a sense of unfinished business. Irina McCarthy's parents spoke about how their daughter had always dreamed of raising a family, how she would never see her son grow up. Kevin McCarthy's father stood there, shaking his head, wondering how this had even happened. As for Crimo, he sat there, his eyes empty, offering no defense, no remorse. He didn't say a word. Judge Victoria Rossetti looked at him and delivered a sentence that sent shivers down the spines of everyone in that room. 7 consecutive life sentences, plus an additional 2,400 years for the attempted murders. Crimo would never see the light of day again. But here's the question: was that enough? Was this really justice? Can a sentence ever truly bring closure to families who've lost their loved ones in such a violent, senseless way? And more importantly, what happens to a community that's forever scarred by an event like this? Can they ever fully recover? Or do they just learn to live with it day by day, trying to rebuild what was lost? Crimo's punishment may have been set, but the real cost of his actions, well, that's something the victims' families, the survivors, and everyone affected by this tragedy will carry with them for the rest of their lives. But here's something I want to know from you. What do you think about Crimo's guilty plea? Do you think it was an attempt to avoid the full consequences of his actions, or do you think it was a sign of guilt? Drop your thoughts below. I really want to hear what you think. The civil suits and the fight for justice. Now the trial is over. Crimo was behind bars and the legal system had done its part, at least in theory. But for the families who had lost loved ones, the survivors who would never be the same, and the community that would forever carry the scars of that day, there was still so much more to be done. You see, even though the courtroom had delivered its sentence, that wasn't the end of the fight for justice. Not by a long shot. Think about this: what do you do when you've lost someone you love? When your world has been shattered by an act of senseless violence? Do you just move on? Do you accept that nothing can be done? Or do you find a way to keep fighting, to hold those responsible accountable in every possible way? That's exactly what the victims' families decided to do. The pain they felt from losing their loved ones couldn't be measured in words, but they were determined to make sure Crimo's actions didn't just end with his prison sentence. No, this was about fighting for a change. This was about ensuring that the world knew how devastating the effects of his actions had been. But what does justice look like when it goes beyond the courtroom? In the months following Crimo's conviction, civil lawsuits started to flood in. The families of the victims, as well as survivors, filed lawsuits against the state of Illinois, the local police, and even the gun manufacturers. What? Well, they weren't just looking for financial compensation, they were looking for accountability. They were looking for a way to say, this should never have happened. Now let's talk about the gun manufacturers. Think about it. Crimo had legally obtained firearms, despite the numerous red flags in his life. How could that be? How could someone with a history of violent threats, a failed suicide attempt, and a general disregard for human life be allowed to get a gun? For many of the families, this was the heart of the issue. Crimo's access to weapons was far too easy. And it wasn't just about the state's responsibility, it was about the companies that made these weapons so readily available to people who should never have had them in the first place. In the wake of the tragedy, survivors, grieving families, and concerned citizens took to the courts to challenge the system. Their goal? To make sure that those responsible, whether it was the gun manufacturers or the local authorities who failed to prevent Crimo from legally obtaining firearms, were held accountable. But let's be real for a moment. Do you think the system will change after this? Do you think these lawsuits will actually make a difference, or are they just another attempt to find closure in a world where justice often seems out of reach? As these lawsuits started to unfold, the media coverage intensified. Crimo's name became synonymous with tragedy. But as much as the families fought for justice, as much as the survivors rallied, there were always those who believed the system couldn't be fixed. After all, mass shootings were becoming a pattern, not an exception. Could anything really change? The survivors, though, many of them, especially the young children who had witnessed the horror, needed something more than legal victory. They needed healing. And healing, as we know, isn't something that can be handed to you in the form of a check. Healing takes time. It takes support. And even with the legal battles raging on, that was something the people of Highland Park had to face on their own. Do you think these legal battles are enough to make a real difference? Or do you believe that until we change how we view gun violence as a society, nothing will truly shift? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. What do you think the real solution is? How do we break the cycle of violence, and what can we do to make sure this doesn't keep happening? Remember to like and subscribe to keep up with this ongoing conversation. We still have one more part to go, and trust me, it's going to dive deep into the emotional aftermath for the community and the families involved. You won't want to miss it. The aftermath and the road to healing. The trial is over. The sentencing has been handed down. Crimo, now behind bars for the rest of his life, has been given the punishment that many believe he deserved. But even with all the legal proceedings behind them, the scars left on the victims' families, the survivors, and the community of Highland Park remain. And those scars? They can never fully heal. The families who lost loved ones that day? They're not just mourning their deaths, they're mourning a world that will never be the same. Irina McCarthy, Kevin McCarthy, and the others, each of them had lives filled with potential, with dreams, with moments yet to be lived. And those moments were stolen in an instant. What does justice mean when you've lost someone so important? When no verdict, no sentence, and no amount of money can bring them back? It's a question that's hard to answer, because sometimes there are no perfect answers. But that doesn't mean we can't still fight for change. That doesn't mean we can't still honor those who are gone by making sure their lives meant something more than just a tragic headline. And that's exactly what the families of the victims have done. Through the pain, through the anger, they've chosen to speak out. They've chosen to make sure the world knows what they've lost, not just in terms of their loved ones, but in terms of their community. They've chosen to be part of the conversation, to demand change, to make sure that the next tragedy doesn't have to happen. But as much as we focus on justice, we also need to remember something else: the importance of healing. Healing takes time. It takes strength. And it takes support from each other. For the families who lost their loved ones, there will never be a return to normal. There will never be a way to undo the damage that was done. But there is a way forward. And that way forward? It's through community. It's through coming together, supporting one another, and remembering the lives that were lost, not just in the context of a horrific act, but in the context of love, family, and hope. For those who survived the attack, those who witnessed the violence, and those who lost everything in a matter of seconds, there is hope. But it's a quiet, fragile kind of hope. One that grows slowly, one day at a time. And in the years to come, those who were there will remember. But they'll also heal. This story isn't just about Crimo. It's about the people who have been forever impacted by his actions. The survivors, the families, the first responders, and the community. It's about their resilience in the face of the unimaginable. It's about their strength in coming together and finding ways to live on in honor of those they lost. To the families who lost loved ones that day, Irina, Kevin, and the others, you are in our thoughts. Your grief is a weight that we can't pretend to fully understand. But know this: your loved ones will never be forgotten. Their names, their stories, their legacies, those will live on. And in a way, they will always be with us. We can't undo the pain, but we can remember. And through that memory, we can grow stronger. So, to everyone watching, I ask this: how can we honor those who are no longer with us? What can we do today, right now, to make sure that we never forget the cost of violence? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear from you. And if this story has touched you, please like and subscribe. Let's keep this conversation going. As we wrap up this video, I want to leave you with one final thought. Asterisk: in a world filled with chaos, it's the love we share, the community we build, and the strength we show that helps us rise above it all. Let's hold on to that. Let's honor the victims and their families by being a little kinder, a little more compassionate, and a little more aware of the power we have to make a difference. Asterisk. Rest in peace to all the victims of the Highland Park shooting. You will never be forgotten. Do like, comment, and subscribe for more chilling stories of our loved ones we can't forget so easily. You can as well share with loved ones so as to console and educate them on the happenings around us. Stay safe until next time.